Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be covering all the fun international friendlies, games, and draws that are going to be taking in October here on She Scores Bangers. Happy fall, happy autumn, happy October, whatever you want to call it. It's a great season ahead of us. It's currently 4 degrees outside where I'm at, but I hope it's a little bit warmer wherever you guys are at. Obviously, September was quite a fun month with a lot of leagues kicking off. Obviously, we had a little bit of delay with the WSL and the Liga F, but so far have been going great, and October is going to be no different either. The action is going to kick off in the Conti Cup on Saturday and Sunday, where there is going to be 10 games across the weekend. Out of the 5 groups, the team who finishes on the first slot goes ahead straight into the quarterfinals. Chelsea and Arsenal don't have to qualify as they're already in the quarterfinals after being in the group stages for the Champions League. Right after that wraps up, we have the international friendly starting on the 6th and concluding on the 11th. There's a ton of very fun matchups, but October 7th has probably the most amount of action packed into it. The reigning European champions are going to take on the reigning World Cup champions at Wembley, probably one of the most prestigious football stadiums in the world. It's set to break a few records in terms of an international friendly record, so that's definitely a game that you want to be involved in, part of the history of it. USA is coming off winning the CONCACAF Championship after beating Canada in the final 1-0, and obviously England's coming off winning the Euros, both coming off on pretty high highs, you could say. Both teams possess a ton of threats. That midfield for both teams has a ton of quality. Defensively, both are very strong, and the forward lines for both teams consist of very good, talented young youth. The US, you could say, is in a little bit of a rebuild state with a lot of the veterans, the Tobin Heath, the Kristen Press not being involved for various reasons. Alex Morgan is also not involved after being ruled out with a knee injury. That's a huge miss for the US, and are still kind of adapting to Andre, the new manager. Obviously, Joel Illis leaving a few years back, but with that being said, they have looked quite impressive, again winning the CONCACAF, not an easy job, and under Serena, England are quite literally unbeaten, and so it's going to be a very fun matchup that you definitely don't want to miss out on. Also on the 7th, Germany is taking on France. What a great game that's going to be, as well as Sweden and Spain going head to head. I'm recording this on the morning of the 30th, and the Spanish team has not been announced just yet. I assume it's a very messy and unpleasant time going on behind doors right now for the Spanish Federation. Obviously, after the 15 players announced and messaged them that they don't want to be involved if Vilda is to be the manager. Those 15 players, a lot of them are in the starting 11. If not, they are some of the main players on that team. They're probably either trying to convince and strike a deal with the players. Maybe they're trying to recruit a lot of the U20, U21 players. I don't know what's happening, but the game does kick off in like 7 days, so they definitely need to release a roster quite quickly. On the 10th, Canada is taking on Morocco. Morocco obviously qualifying for their first ever World Cup, a huge thing for the nation. They also reached the African Cup final and did brilliantly well in that competition. They actually scored 4 out of their 9 goals of set pieces, and the 2 other goals came from also similar kind of crossing styles from the white players. I was able to ask Canada's head coach, Beth Priestman, on how she thought Canada's going to be dealing with those set pieces threats that Morocco is likely going to present.
My challenge to Canada will be that we maintain World Cup standards, and that's what we've really gone after. You know, Australia, we did that well, and it's sort of been our bread and butter, is to defend the box well, to stop crosses, to deal with those sorts of things. And I think we can't slip up, we can't let our standards drop, and we have to pay respect to any opposition in front of us. You know, Morocco are going to a World Cup. There's a reason for that. So yeah, I think that'll be our challenge with any team that we play. And I think at the highest level in World Cup football, often it is crossing. It's a great number 9. It's set plays, all these little 1% things we have to train every day, like we're in a World Cup final, and play like that, because when it really matters, as we've experienced, you need to be able to deliver in their moments.
On the 11th, also a very fun game against Sweden and France, as well as the Netherlands and Norway. Both of them quite poor in the Euros, so now it's very important for them to kind of forget that, start new momentum, start new consistency, start kind of a new page going into the World Cup. Both of them are working with new managers. The managers, both of them got sacked after the Euros, obviously, so it's going to be really fun to see how they're dealing with that change. Denmark, Australia, very good matchup, and then Spain and the US. I also can't talk much about how that's going to go, as we don't know who the hell is going into the game from the Spanish team, so it's going to be a very interesting few hours, few days to see what the Federation decides to do. Also during that period, there's going to be more World Cup qualifiers. There's 3 more slots still to be taken. The first bunch of these games are going to take place on the 6th, and then there's going to be 3 teams waiting for those 3 winners on the 11th. A lot of these teams that are playing for that final spot have never had World Cup football, So it's always very fun and just joyous to see some of these nations go into their first ever World Cup. Now, after all of that is done on the 11th, we're going to have the World Cup draw on the 22nd. Now, obviously, this World Cup is expanded into a 32-team nation World Cup. There's going to be 8 groups. Obviously, Australia and New Zealand have already qualified and placed in Group A and B separately, as they are the host nations. But like previously mentioned, a lot of the international matchups that are taking place during this window are nations that are likely going to face off against each other in the World Cup, or might even end up in the same group. Hence why it's going to be very fun and interesting for us to get a taste of that before the World Cup next year. Another draw that is going to be taking place very soon, actually on Monday, October the 3rd, is the Champions League draw. The qualifiers just concluded. Real Sociedad was able to participate in the first ever Champions League debut. Unfortunately, they were linked up with Bayern Munich, which is just a tough task, and they obviously were not able to get past it, but a very good showing for the Spanish side. Real Madrid also just qualified for the second one in a row. Caroline Weir for them has been on absolute fire and a very dynamite player in their success so far. This is also going to be the first Champions League that we have 2 Italian teams involved. Both Juventus and Roma were able to make it out of the qualifiers. Arsenal obviously were able to beat Ajax in the away game, but some news did surface after that game that Ajax did intentionally or unintentionally make their goals 10 centimeters smaller to have a bit of an advantage over Arsenal, definitely not a disadvantage. It also resurfaced to us that in the Champions League, teams are not allowed a concussion substitution, which I think puts players, the competition, and teams as a whole in a crappy situation. In fact, it really jeopardizes a lot of things, and I really hope this does not go into effect moving on in the competition. Obviously, if you don't know what happened, Beth Mead did have quite an unpleasant head collision with one of the Ajax players.
Mead the side of hers. Oof. Certainly Mead did nothing wrong. Eye on the ball. And I don't think it was deliberate, but...
Where Jonas Eidevall, the manager, came out and later said that they were not allowed a concussion substitution. Not ideal. Hopefully we don't see any of these positions or plays take place, but in a sport that's quite as physical as football can get, sometimes it's hard to count on and guarantee that you're never going to have a head collision that might look as bad or even worse as the Beth Mead collision. This is how the 4 pots look like. Obviously, pot 1 has all the winners of the domestic leagues, respectively. However, the groups end up looking like, I think this year is going to be probably one of the closest ones that we've seen, even though last year was also just as tight as anything. It keeps getting more competitive, and how fun is that? During the qualifiers, Bayern impressed the hell out of me. Not to say that Bayern is not impressive and we don't know that they play great football. Obviously we know that, that's a given, but the new chemistry and link-on play between Lohman, Stanway and Zdrizel is just chef's kiss to watch. I also must mention that DAZN is going to be carrying all these group stages games on YouTube, and so it's a great way for us to be able to access it freely and nicely and with great commentating. So DAZN, put it on your list. You're going to be able to watch pretty much all these games on there for them as well. Lastly, we have the Ballon d'Or winner announcement on October 17th. Obviously, Alexia Putellas is the last winner for that and is running to be in that position again. Very interestingly, 10 years ago on this day, she scored her first goal for Barcelona. So we've come miles ahead since then. I covered the entire nominee list for the Ballon d'Or, and so if you have not checked it out and want to know who is in that position to win the next Ballon d'Or, make sure you check it out. A lot of players have had incredible seasons both at club and international level, and so it's going to be interesting to see who comes up on top. Obviously, Alexia is dealing with an ACL injury that ruled her out of the Euros. We're going to see how much that impacts her voting and runnings for that position again. Let me know which international games you're most looking forward to and who do you think the World Cup qualifier is going to seal the deal for. As always, I'm going to make sure to keep you posted and updated on all these results, draws, and everything that you need to know about. To stay updated and to continue enjoying the beautiful game, make sure you subscribe to us here on YouTube and follow us on Twitter. I will see you later.